My next guest is a rare example of somebody who has been hit by lawfare even harder than me. Douglas Mackey, welcome to the show. How are you today, Douglas?
Great to be here. Thank you. Doing well.
I'm glad to hear that. I think a lot of people have heard about you, but your story was somewhat buried by the mainstream news. And obviously, there's a lot of people who don't want people to know about you. You are the guy who got jammed up for making what I thought were pretty funny memes about Hillary Clinton prior to the 2016 election. Isn't that right?
Yeah, exactly. This was from the 2016 election. And what's crazy is I didn't even make these memes. I just shared them.
Wow. Well, give us those details, because I think there's a lot of people who maybe, like me, aren't completely clear. Give us the whole story. I mean, that's amazing. So this is 8, 9 years of your life that have been consumed by this. Even if you are ultimately able to receive justice through appeal, you're never going to get all this time back, the stress. Tell us everything that happened.
Yeah, so back in 2016, I shared a lot of memes basically supporting Trump and all kinds of stuff, news. So I gained a large following on Twitter and was sort of just a big account for Trump news, election news, memes, humor, everything else. So we shared all kinds of memes. When I say we, it was a small group of, um, meme lords or whatever you want to call them, meme makers. And people made memes, they got shared around. Everybody was sort of doing this whole thing. And so what happened was I saw these memes that I thought were funny about texting your vote from home. Don't like that one. Yeah, save time, avoid the line. Text from home. Text Hillary to 5525, something like that. And so all I did was I just couple clicks of a button shared two of these memes from 4chan. They had these Trump general threads back in the day where they just shared a bunch of memes and stuff and video clips, whatever. So I just go on there once in a while and see what's up, see what's on there, see if I can share anything to Twitter. I shared it to Twitter and got this was my second account. My first account was already banned. So I shared it to Twitter, my second account, and got banned for it and just kind of forgot about it because it didn't seem like a whole big deal. Now, 4 years later, I got the knock on my door at 7 a.m. from four FBI agents and
Wow.
multiple police officers.
Wow. Now, wait a minute. You look like an unassuming guy to me. Have you ever been, I don't know, an international arms dealer or a drug kingpin or anything like that?
No, no criminal record, nothing whatsoever.
So you must have been shocked when all these police officers and FBI people showed up at your house. What, did they have guns pointed at you?
They didn't draw their guns. I mean, I guess that was a minor miracle, but
Yeah.
I was surprised. It was crazy. All these people. And, the craziest thing is they started to say, what is this for? Like, what am I being arrested for? I had no idea until after the arraignment when I
Wow.
finally got to read the criminal complaint against me.
No, so
And
wait a
all of
minute,
a
because I think a
sudden,
lot of
I had
people
no
don't
idea.
know. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think a lot of people don't know the sequence. So they come to your house, you get arrested, you're handcuffed, I presume, and stuffed into a car, driven to some jail somewhere. And the arraignment is when they take you out of the jail, bring you into court, and a judge tells you, Mr. Mackey, do you understand, blah, blah, blah. How much time were you in jail and you're asking them what's going on? What was that all like?
So yeah, I was like just like you said, I was put in the back of the FBI SUV and taken to the county, not the county, the federal courthouse. And then because it was COVID, I'm just kind of sitting there for, they don't even have the courthouse open yet because of COVID or whatever. Finally get in there. I'm sitting in a holding cell. It felt like 2 hours, but who knows? Maybe it was 1 hour. And then I get dragged in front of a judge, except it's on a Zoom. So I'm sitting in front of a laptop talking to the judge, and it was crazy. I was in the holding cell for 1, 2 hours.
And are you married, or do you have anybody you live with or anything like that?
So at the time, I had two roommates. Since then, I have gotten married, started a family, so we live. I have my family, but then I had two roommates, and the roommates had no idea what was going on. no idea. And the FBI sat them on the couch and tried to, get them to spill information. It was just completely bizarre, surreal experience. So weird. And to their credit, they said, you're going to have to talk to my lawyer. Like, I'm not talking to you.
Right. And so what
Not that there was
exactly,
anything for them to say. I mean, what are they going to
right,
say? Oh,
what
yeah,
is the
he makes
charge?
memes 4 years ago. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
What is the charge exactly that you've been hit with?
So that's why I said, what is the charge? I got a glance of the paperwork and it says conspiracy against rights.
Oh,
What in the world is going on? So not until after the arraignment, they slap a 30-page document in my hands, and then I'm finally able to read this whole completely convoluted narrative that they've constructed, all for a meme.
it really is unbelievable. I mean, it's like a kind of a George Orwell meets Kafka kind of a nightmare. And of course, everybody knows by now that they basically succeeded in doing this. You were actually convicted and sentenced. So what was the sentence? You went to jail, didn't you?
So I didn't go to jail only because we appealed the bond decision. The
Huh.
judge, I was sentenced to 7 months in federal prison,
Wow.
and the judge said, okay, you report on January 18th. That would have been of 2024. And we said, okay, we're moving for an appeal bond, so you can, I can be free pending appeal. I mean, this is obviously going to be appealed, and it's a strong appeal. We feel like there's multiple grounds for appeal, and the judge, she rejected it. So we had to go to the court and get the district court, the appeals court, excuse me, federal appellate court, to overturn her decision. And thankfully they did. So thankfully I've been out on appeal for over a year now since the sentence.
It's unbelievable. So this was all happening in the Eastern District of New York, which I guess you live in Brooklyn, or where was this all happening?
No, that's great. That's a funny question. I'm glad you asked that question. I lived in Manhattan back in
Okay.
2016 and moved to Florida. Here's the whole point. Manhattan is not in the Eastern District of New York.
It's the Southern
So
District.
why in the world are they dragging me into court there? The Eastern District of New York has a history of poaching. They call it poaching cases. And they drag people into the courtroom on the most tenuous of circumstances, linking them to the Eastern District. But usually they at least have something linking to the Eastern District. Like, so there's a lot of cases like this. Well, they at least have something like the defendant went to the Eastern District in the course of committing his crime or conspiring or whatever. In my case, there was no connection, except they tried to argue that exactly, there you go, Andrew Weissman uh, came out of Eastern District, and that's no surprise. So
Did you not
anyway,
know that before right now?
I did know that. I did know that. Yeah, of course, it's a
Yeah.
very these people in the Eastern District, they are sort of hunting for
Evil?
glory. I mean, that's the way to
No,
put it.
they're
And
evil.
when it comes to yeah, exactly. And when it comes to foreign terrorists, they're dragging them to Eastern. You say, okay, fine, but we're talking about American citizens sharing First Amendment protected activity. So what they said at trial and on appeal is that the tweets passed over a wire over Manhattan
Oh,
through the water surrounding the island,
wow.
and that water is shared jurisdiction with SDNY and EDNY.
That's crazy.
And that is the second basis of the appeal. So we don't think that that's legitimate at all based on case law and the Constitution, which says you have a right to be tried in the state and district where you're accused of committing the crime. And that is because the British authorities would try to haul colonists back to London to be tried in a far-flung jurisdiction in front of jurors that are completely, not their peers, completely foreign to them and hostile to them. So that's a constitutional protection.
Wow. See, I'm glad we're having this conversation, Douglas. And there's some other people who are famously from the Eastern District of New York who you may or may not be aware of. Judge Burl Howell, who is now a senior judge in the District of Columbia and another major Trump antagonist. She was in the Eastern District of New York. But a little known what do we want to call this person? Vagrant, troll, mafiosa, criminal who is from the Eastern District of New York, who has been one of my main adversaries. Maybe you do or don't know this person, but it's District Court Judge Valerie Caproni. Have you ever heard of her before?
No, no.
Yeah, see, this is good that we're having this discussion. Valerie Caproni was the U.S. attorney. She was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of New York and the head of the Organized Crime Division while Andrew Weissman was coming up through the Eastern District. Weissman even refers to Caproni as his mentor. She's mentioned many times in his book. And she left the Eastern District of New York to become the FBI General Counsel, where she was the champion of an FBI sort of issue that they dubbed going dark. She was really the first person in the FBI who we see speaking about this historically, and it's still spoken about. This going dark is a problem as perceived by the FBI in the early 2000s. You know, is the proliferation of all this digital communication technology, disappearing chat logs, end-to-end encryption, all the types of things that privacy advocates want on computers. Valerie Caproni and the FBI were very much against this. Caproni was also one of the key people, I allege, responsible for inserting the FBI into Twitter, something that people have heard quite a lot about. Now, she was run out of the FBI after Democrats in Congress determined that she had broken the law something like several thousand times by violating people's Fourth Amendment rights with these national security letters, something I'm sure they probably did to you. It's become common practice now. I've written all about this in the Twitter coup, where I talk about how Adam Sharp and Valerie Caproni orchestrated this plan to turn Twitter into a fifth-generation warfare weapon. And you got tangled in the net.
Right. And I'm not
How else?
surprised by it.
Yeah, how else has this affected your life, Douglas? Obviously, the cost of the attorneys is tremendous. We should remind people that if anybody is interested, and I do encourage Crowdsource the Truth viewers to do this, they can support your legal defense fund at douglasmackey.com. There's two S's in Douglas, and it's Mackey, like the famous audio mixer brand. People can support your battle, and they should, because this is, whether they know you or not, whether even people like you or not, this is something that could be done to anyone. This injustice cannot stand.
Exactly. Try to imagine, if you will, 4 years from today, and Kamala Harris is going to be inaugurated in 3 days. I mean, it's painful to imagine, but it's possible. And now that Trump's in office, it kind of seems like, well, what's the point of this appeal anymore? Well, it's really about the law and the abuse of the law. And like you said, the Eastern District in particular appears to have a contempt for following the law. They feel like they're above the law and that they can subvert the law to get to do what they want. So this is very important, that the appeal seeks to limit the application of a very old statute called conspiracy against rights. Not only that, there's the venue angle, which is that you can't just be dragged into court in any district in the country because you send a tweet and it passes over some wires. So please, if you can, even with Trump being inaugurated, it's very important that we fight this appeal, that we win this appeal. And there's many ways to donate: crypto, GoFundMe. There's even a 501c3 or 4, whatever it is, that if you go there, your donation is actually tax deductible. So absolutely, the case has been, personally, I've spent all my savings fighting this case, and I'm very lucky that we've had so many great donors who helped pay for the trial. Very expensive proposition, I'll tell you, going to trial. That's the most expensive thing you can do. The pretrial appeals are expensive. The post-trial appeal, very expensive, especially if we go to the Supreme Court. I don't know what's going to happen, but the trial itself was very expensive. So even though we've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, we've spent every single penny here.
Wow.
So
What
Please
has that
donate
total
if you
cost
can.
been, if you don't mind me asking? Yes, please donate. This is a very important thing for people to support. But forgive me for interrupting there. What has the total cost been? You said hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, yeah. So even just pre-trial, six figures.
Wow.
Trial, forget about it. Half a million for a
Hmm.
trial. It's insane the amount of preparation. I mean, the trial attorney that I had, the criminal defense attorney, he did a great job, but he was just one guy. We could have spent, if we had $2 million, we could have hired a white shoe firm. We could have hired a team of seven attorneys or whatever, and a white shoe law firm. We had one guy, he did an amazing job. We barely lost the trial, which is what some people don't even understand. We actually barely lost the trial. Only after days of deliberations and an Allen charge did the government actually secure a conviction. And now I'm fortunate that we have Jones Day, who is handling the appeal, and they're terrific, but they are top dollar. Absolutely. And we're talking another six figures.
Wow.
Not
I'm
low six
surprised.
figures either for the appeal.
Right. I'm surprised some of these law firms would even take the case because a lot of law firms don't want to go near anything that, or at least, prior to Trump 2.0, where
Yeah.
now he's back to being the most popular guy around, there were a lot of lawyers and law firms who look at somebody like you, look at somebody like me and say, oh, this is a pro-Trump person and he's fighting for some sort of Trump something or other. We don't want to even get behind this guy. It can be quite treacherous. One more thing I want to bring to your attention along the lines of the Eastern District of New York. So this is a video version of the Twitter coup. People can see this on X. There's another person in the triad of FBI general counsels with Caproni, Andrew Weissman, and of course Jim Baker. Jim Baker became the FBI general counsel after Weissman left. And when Donald Trump issued an executive order, do you remember when they started censoring Trump on Twitter in May? He had an executive order about censorship on social media. And he basically was saying, here we go, it's intended to, executive order preventing online censorship. This was issued May 28th, 2020. And he's basically saying free speech is the bedrock of American democracy. You can't go jamming up guys like Douglas Mackey, etc. But this was May 2020. Jim Baker goes to Twitter only weeks after this.
Yep.
So it was a direct response. Here we see Twitter hires former FBI general counsel. What's our date on this? Bloomberg Law. It was, see, it's all this now leads you to Musk firing him, but he went there just weeks after. I'll find the date,
Yeah.
but I don't know. What do you think about all that, Doug?
I can tell you that one thing that was revealed in the Twitter files is that a man named Elvis Chan, FBI agent, special agent out of San Francisco, he was sending, they had their own hotline to Twitter, obviously, with Jim Baker and everything else, probably helped set it up. He was sending preservation requests to Twitter during the 2020 election cycle regarding jokes people were making on the internet, like, oh, Democrats vote on Wednesday, Republicans vote on Tuesday. Or people were making joke like, I'm inside the ballot office and I'm shredding the ballots. These are obvious jokes. And he's sending preservation saying, we're going to serve legal papers, subpoenas for these people who are making jokes. That's a direct outcome of my case that they prosecuted. They think they have the right to do this. They think they have the right to trot all over our liberties unless the court is going to step in here and say, look, you can't use this law. You can't abuse this conspiracy against rights law, which was written because the KKK would go around and attack people on the roads. Maybe they were going to the polls to cast their vote. They would attack black people. This is what the law is for. It's not supposed to be this catch-all govern internet speech bill, which is what they try to do. And get this, Jack Smith, special counsel Jack Smith, he charged Trump with this count in the DC indictment. This was one of the
Yeah.
4 counts that he charged Trump with.
And you know which U.S. Attorney's office Jack Smith was in? The Eastern District of New York,
Right.
under Andrew
Shocker.
Weissman. So this is a cabal that exists in
Yes.
that office there. And, they search around for these obscure statutes to try to use against people. The tactics that you're describing as far as sending these evidence preservation letters, this is exactly what my antagonist does. He's not formally working for the FBI, but this is obviously standard lawfare tactics. Now, here's Reuters. I found the article reporting Twitter hires former top FBI lawyer June 16th. So it's less than a month, 3 weeks after Trump issues this executive order. Where did it go? This guy, he obviously knows they need to preserve their ability to communicate with Twitter through scumbags like Elvis Chan. And see, every little thing they do, like you just told us something important. There were details from your case that become sort of a building block to the next thing that they're doing. This is how lawfare works. It's a ladder. It's like pegs that mountain climbers stick into mountains. Each peg is another level that they advance upward. So even if you say, hey, wait a minute, all the way down here at the base of the mountain, you had no right to even arrest me for this. But that doesn't matter. We're already 5 pegs above that. We're not falling down below the previous peg. It's an incredible system.
Exactly. And maybe you'll get it overturned on appeal years later. They don't have a great track record on appeal, do they?
Well,
Jack Smith has a horrible track record on appeal.
Right.
But they don't care. They don't care. Their job, as they see it, as sort of deep state / liberal activists, is to just push the law as far as they can and force the courts to maybe pare it back a little bit. And once they have the precedent, then that's what they're going to go. They're going to expand and abuse that even further to go after more people.
Exactly.
And it ties into everything, like you just said. It all ties together. They charged Trump with this under the statute after they were able to charge me with it. And then there were white papers by Brennan Center or something of that nature,
Really?
saying we need to charge pro-lifers with the same exact statute, 18 USC 241. They've convicted, I think, dozens of pro-lifers under 18 USC 241 because they prayed outside an abortion clinic. Maybe they blocked the door for 2 minutes and they're going to charge them with a federal felony. One lady got 44 months in prison. She's serving that now, and I'm hoping that Trump pardons her on day one.
This is interesting.
Unbelievable. 44 months for protesting.
That is unbelievable. I'm really glad that you're bringing this to my attention. The Brennan Center for Justice has a guy there by the name of, I think, Michael German. Have you ever heard of this guy?
No.
So Michael German, see, I became very suspicious of this guy because he seemed like he would be an excellent guy for me to speak to. He's a former FBI, he's a fellow at the Brennan Center's Liberty and National Security Program, which seeks to ensure that the U.S. government respects human rights and fundamental freedoms in conducting the fight against terrorism. A former special agent with the FBI, his work focuses on law enforcement. Now, this guy has a backstory where, he was, according to him, antagonized by and sort of whistleblowing against Valerie Caproni. And when I first learned about him, I said, oh, wow, this would be a great guy for me to speak to because Valerie Caproni is doing all kinds of things to conspire with other people against my rights. However, I can't get in touch with this guy. Left him messages, send him all kinds of DMs and everything. And I've come to believe the reason for that is this guy is full of shit. And he is there to make sure that the Brennan Center pretends to be protecting people's rights. Meanwhile, it's writing articles like what you're talking about, where they can now go introduce these articles and give courts judicial notice saying, oh, look at this highfalutin muckety-muck think tank within NYU wrote this thing about why 18 USC 241 should be used against abortion clinic protesters. And this is how they build a false consensus and attempt to apply credibility to their nonsense.
Exactly. And they have complete contempt for the First Amendment, freedom of speech, especially if you're on the right side of the aisle. Especially so for them, rights involves, they're really adamant about protecting voting rights. They don't care about free speech rights at all, to be honest with you. The only thing that they care about, if you're not black or transgender, I don't think they care about your rights. What they're the big ACLU, and this guy, I saw he was ex ACLU, shocker. All they care about right now is suing so that men can stay in female prisons, that men can continue competing against female athletes. And like I said, they don't care about you and your rights. If you're not black, transgender, they don't care about free speech rights. All they care about, I would say, is probably they would sue if you tried to ban some pornographic book from the local children's library. That's the rights they care about. They do not care about, and these rights are not even rights, first of all. They're far from fundamental. They're not fundamental at all, even if they're not even rights. But we're talking about freedom of speech. That's fundamental to the right to vote. There's no real right to vote without freedom of speech, because then what is the point? What's the whole point? I mean, you have a right to vote in Venezuela or Soviet Union, but it's meaningless, completely meaningless. So they're just partisan agents.
Yeah.
That guy, German, I absolutely 100% believe he's just a partisan agent, and they have a very convoluted understanding of civil rights.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a charade, this fighting for rights. All the things that you're talking about, they're actually fighting to destroy America. And I suspect, I don't have really a lot of firsthand experience or communication with somebody who would fit that description, but I suspect they don't even care about the rights of transgender or minority individuals. They just want to fight for them because that's sort of the smaller side of the scale. And once that wins, they'll fight against those people too. They're trying to fundamentally change America, to destroy our access to justice in the courts, which frankly, they've effectively done. You are a prime example of someone who, you look like a pretty young guy. I'm glad that you were able to get married through all of this and still maintain your life, but they're kind of hitting you at a time in your life where most people are building a business, building a family. This is very, very destructive to you and your well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very destructive. It's very stressful. It's very destructive. And that's the whole point. They just want to punish Trump supporters on the other side. I would point out that the chief prosecutor, the lead prosecutor in my case, was the quote unquote elections fraud guru for New York City. They created, however many of these prosecutors that they designated as the election fraud point of contact, or so to speak. And so this guy was the point of contact, and it's New York City in 2020. Can you imagine how much voter fraud there was in that city and what they could have done? But they spent years and God knows how many millions of dollars investigating my case, which they investigated for 2 years, and then prosecuting it for another 3 years, 4 years. We're on appeal now. It just keeps on going. It keeps going and going. And I'm grateful that we've had people drawing light to it. President Trump himself named my case, called out my case by name, and said that this is what as an example, a prime example of the weaponization of justice.
Well, I hope you'll get to meet President Trump, or have you?
I haven't. I'd love to hopefully meet him one day. I was fortunate enough to go on Donald Trump Jr.'s podcast, who's been a great supporter as well. And I would have to mention Mr. Tucker Carlson, who was the first and foremost champion in my case. So these guys have been, really looking out for me, for us, for our rights, and I'm very hopeful about what President Trump's going to do in his second term.
That's good. It's good to meet you, Doug. I'm glad we got this chance to speak. I know you're very busy and don't have a lot of time. I do want to make sure we've covered everything. Is there anything else you wanted to tell people about? Definitely people should follow you on X. They can find you there at Doug Mackey Case. And you've got all the links to the memedefensefund.com, givesendgo.com/Douglas Mackey, douglasmackey.com, and also your Substack, where you're writing articles and all that kind of stuff. Anything else you think we should tell everybody about?
So you've covered all the bases as far as the links. That's pretty much does it. But the only thing I would suggest to people is, we need to win this case. What's crazy is they actually introduced as evidence old DM chat groups of like old memes floating around, and said this is the background to the conspiracy, right? So because you made a meme or you've shared a meme 6 months prior shows that you're part of some conspiracy of like meme makers. But those memes may be legal. That's okay. But what they did is they introduced all this evidence to just smear me in court. And they brought this case, like I said, in the Eastern District of New York, because that's where they felt like they could get a conviction. Not to mention that they hunt these cases. Like you said, they poach these cases. So it's really crazy what's happening. But we think we're going to win this one. We even have the Harvard Law Review on our side, shockingly enough.
Yeah.
So because they understand that this is a direct assault on satire. And you're going to put a satire in front of 12 jurors and tell them in a hostile district and tell them it's your job to discern the motive here, not based on any hard evidence, completely circumstantial evidence that I somehow wanted to stop thousands or even just one person from voting. They didn't have any hard evidence that I actually wanted to stop anyone from voting, and actually thought that this ridiculous meme, this joke meme, would actually trick one single person out of voting. But with lawfare, it doesn't matter. They can bring these cases. There's a high bar, a very high bar to get them dismissed. And ironically, this is now what they're extremely concerned about. They're very concerned that President Trump is going to go after them because they're essentially conceding that the federal criminal code is so unwieldy, it's so large, and it's so bloated that you can just basically pin a crime on anybody you want.
Right.
So the irony is that now the shoe's on the other foot. They're petrified. They're spending money to retain lawyers. They're basically trying to cover all their bases. The irony is too much, but that's all I got on the top of my mind. There's, I could talk about this case all day, but it's crazy, and I'm really grateful to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I'm grateful to have met you, Doug. You are a really interesting and nice guy, and this is a very important case. I'm sorry it's had such a negative impact on your life. I mean, I've made brief allusions to the lawfare that I've been experiencing, nothing like what you have. I would add to what you're saying that it's not just that they're so concerned with that. I don't necessarily like that description because it makes it seem like there is a concern there and they're becoming concerned with it. It's that they're fixated on this because they know they have a scheme to get you with it. They're actually not concerned with anything other than controlling you, controlling what can be said on the internet, controlling jokes. I mean, I lost all of my money in a civil matter over also a visual parody that if I showed it to you right now, I'd be in contempt of court and they could put me in jail. People can go to the HollywoodReporter.com and still see it because even though I was ordered to take down every single copy and every single instance of it, the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, the corrupt organization that gives out Emmys, they put a whole article about this trial in the Hollywood Reporter with the image that they allege they hate so much they spent $2 million suing me. And just like you pointed out, the government wastes money suing you. Nonprofit corporations and white shoe law firms, they generally don't get involved with people like us. I don't have millions of dollars worth of assets. It's not even worth their time, their legal billing.
Exactly.
So there's something else going on here. It's that they want to suppress the Constitution, and they're starting like this to chill this kind of speech to make other people say, oh, wow, look at what happened to Douglas Mackey. I don't want 8 years taken out of my life. Incidentally, that's the duration of mine as well. So I'm very hopeful that Donald Trump 2.0 is going to be our first anti-lawfare president. We need some anti-lawfare legislation. And Doug, I hope at the end of the day, this whole thing can be a big lemonade stand for you, where you will take this and turn it into a life's mission that will help other people and ultimately work out well for you.
God willing, we have to fight against it. And absolutely. And like you said, we're hoping President Trump does. I'll be definitely fighting against this in other cases in the future. It's the laundry list goes on and on of these kind of cases. Just in the Eastern District alone, they have the FBI agent who was the lead agent on my case didn't even testify at my trial, which is basically unheard of. She was on leave, standing accused of fabricating digital evidence or tampering with digital evidence in a different case. In a case that's now ongoing, the Keith Rainier case.
Oh my God.
In the Eastern District of New York. And this is the lead FBI agent on my case. And, you know, I would love to know where, maybe we could file some FOIAs. I would love to know where she's at, whether she's still on leave. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And there's just countless cases like this. Tom Barack, who is a great friend of Trump, helped him with the first inauguration. They went after him for supposedly being a foreign agent of UAE or whatever, and completely lost in court. Barack was acquitted on all charges. They were just going after a Trump guy, and they dragged him into EDNY based on some tenuous thread, like he had a houseboat on the water or something like that. Completely farcical. Wow. That case never got litigated because he won outright. He was acquitted.
Unbelievable. So here we have the FBI. I mean, obviously Keith Rainier is a terrible guy, but we should be able to prosecute him without fabricating evidence. I mean, this all mirrors what happened in my case. When you have exculpatory evidence, they keep you away from it. They need to make evidence to frame you. There was an email that I believe I know who created that caused the whole civil lawsuit. They won't let me get to the actual identity of who created it, because that would prove or disprove exactly what I'm saying. Doug, I'm so glad that you and I connected. I definitely want to stay in touch with you. And as there are developments in the case, I hope you'll come back to the show. There's so much more for you and I to discuss. I think you do have a very important mission in shining a light on this kind of FBI malfeasance, this judicial branch malfeasance. You really are a great guy to speak to. I'm glad to have met you. And I want to make sure that people who are watching support your defense. There's a lot of great ways to do it, and people can find all the links there on your X account. People can, having a little problem with the switcher there, sorry. People can find you there at Doug Mackey Case. Support Doug to the greatest extent that you are able. He's fighting the good fight. He's been caught up in the wheels of justice. Doug, best of luck to you in the future. Thanks for coming on the show. And I also want to remind people that they can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, or subscribestar.com, or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Doug, thanks very much. And thanks everybody for watching.